In this video, I will discuss about the constructor example. In last video, there is some issue. Due to that, I couldn't show the example. In previous video, I have covered the types of constructor with example. Okay, and in this video, I will discuss the example of the constructor. Theoretical part already covered. So in this video, we'll discuss the example of the types of constructor. We have four types of constructor. Default constructor, that is also known as parameterless constructor. Parameterized constructor, copy constructor, and static constructor. We will see four examples in this video. Okay. And also we will discuss in this video what is the need of constructor, why constructor needed. Okay, so after uh, completing these examples, I will discuss about the need of the constructor. So first of all, we will see default constructor or parameter less constructor. So I have created the project with the name constructor example, and we will discuss here what is the default constructor. Okay, suppose just we have created another class on const test. This is the class, or we can say parameter param less constructor, parameter less constructor. Okay, this is the class name, and we will create the constructor. What is the constructor? Constructor is a special method which name is same as the class name. Okay, which name is same as the class name. This is the special type of method. Okay, we will see here in the example we are showing the example of parameterless constructor or default constructor. Parameterless or default constructor both are same, and the parameterless constructor, that means there is no parameter. Okay, suppose we are not creating the constructor here in this. Suppose we are just okay, each and first of all, you need to know that each and every class have default constructor. If you don't explicitly define any constructor, then by the compiler, default constructor is created. Suppose in this class we don't have any constructor. Okay, then what type of constructor automatically created by the compiler? That is default constructor. Why the default constructor is created by the compiler? Why? Because if a class doesn't have any constructor, then without constructor we can't create the instance of a particular class. Okay, without constructor, if a class doesn't have a constructor, if a class doesn't have a constructor, then that class instance we can't create. That is the reason, if explicitly programmer doesn't define any constructor, then implicitly by the compiler automatically created the implicit constructor, that is parameterless constructor. Okay, and why the compiler create parameterless constructor? Because that is implicitly created. Okay, and that is implicitly created, and compiler doesn't know what type of parameter we need to pass. Okay, that is the reason that implicit constructor is created. Implicit constructor is implicitly constructor is created, and the constructor is created of type default constructor. Okay, so constructor is needed. Each and every class needed constructor. If explicitly not defined any constructor, then implicitly defined by the compiler, that is default constructor. Okay, because without constructor we can't create the instance of a particular class. So if programmer doesn't define, then compiler define. So this is default constructor or parameterless constructor. Now I explicitly define this parameterless or default constructor. That's why no need to define any constructor by the compiler. If any constructor, whether parameterless constructor or parameterized constructor, is created, is defined by the programmer explicitly, then no constructor will created by the compiler. Okay, this is the default constructor. And suppose there console dot write line default constructor is called default constructor is called in the main method. When we create the instance of the particular class, parameter param less constructor, suppose p1 param less cons equal to new param, we are just explicitly calling the constructor, that is default constructor. Okay, here we are just creating the instance of the particular class, parameterless cons class. So when we create the instance of the particular class, then here we just calling the constructor. Okay, then the constructor is called and create the instance of a particular class, initialize all the data members of the particular class. There is no any data member variable, so it's only this parameterless constructor, this one param-less constructor is called, and this print default constructor is called. Okay, default constructor is called, the output is default constructor is called. Okay, and suppose when we create another instance of that particular class, this one here, line number 20, we are creating the instance of this particular class. Okay, calling the constructor, this one default constructor, then this message, this console.write line default constructor is called is printed, and again we are creating the instance of that particular class, then again the constructor is called. Okay, whenever the instance is created, constructor is called. So two times constructor is called means two times default constructor is called printed. Okay, now we are discuss now we will discuss what is the parameter parameterized constructor. This is parameterless. This is parameterless means there is no parameter. Okay. Now we will discuss parameterized constructor. And what is the difference between parameterless and parameterized constructor? Suppose currently here we have parameterless constructor, that is default constructor. Then what happening in this? In this happening, how many times of the instance is created? Means any number of instance you created, every time the same default constructor is called is printed. Okay. Every time or any number of time you create the instance of this particular class, the same thing is happened. Okay. Suppose I will give an example here. Public int I equal to 100. Okay. Just we are printing value of I is I. Okay. This is the parameterless constructor. What happening in this? Whenever you create the instance of the paramless constructor, then what happening? Just here we are creating the instance of paramless constructor. Then memory for this int I is created. Okay. And again we are creating the instance of this paramless constructor one. Means what happening behind this paramless constructor, when we are creating the instance of first time paramless constructor, then one instance is created, and in that one instance I equal to 100. And when again we are creating the instance of the paramless constructor, then again one copy of I is maintained, that is also 100. Okay. In both the instances, this one and this one, both have separate copy of I and both have 100. Okay. Then the how many times of instance, if you create 100 instance or 10 instance, then each and every instance have a separate copy of I, and each and every uh, copy of I have 100 value. Okay. And if you want to uh, if you want to give different uh, copy, means different value with each instance. Suppose this instance is created, then we are passing the value of I10. If second instance is created, then I want to pass the value of I is 20, like that. With each instance we are just passing the value. We want to maintain the separate copy, that is already done, but also with some different values. Okay. Currently what happening in the parameterless constructor, we are just maintaining the separate copy but with a separate value. For each instance we have separate copy of I with the same value 100 in each instance. Okay, but I want to manage separate copy with separate values, means different values with each instance. Then parameterized constructor is required, because here in this example, just I have doesn't I have not used the parameterized constructor. That is why in each and every instance we will see the value of I is 100. Okay, value of I is 100 here, value of I is 100 here also. And if we use the parameterized constructor, suppose int I also here, and in the constructor this dot I equal to I, this local value, this I where we selected this I, then this I is highlighted, means this I is point, this I means this I. Okay, this local variable is assigning to this I, this where is selecting this one, then highlight will highlighted this one. Okay, when I selected this one, then this one highlighted this one, and this I means class variable. Okay, this I indicate the class variable, and this I indicate the local variable. Okay, this I indicate the local variable. When we're selecting this I, then this is highlighted, when this I means local variable, and this I means class variable. Okay, we are just assigning the local variable to class variable. Okay, and here if we pass 10 and here we pass 20, then we are calling the parameterized constructor. Here the 10 value is passing here in the I, and this is assigned to this one, maintaining the separate copy with separate values. Okay, 10 and 20. Okay, this is the use of parameterized constructor. Suppose currently we have the class, this one. Okay, this is the class, and this class we want to use wherever we want to use, and whenever we can use whenever required, and wherever required we can use this class. Okay, then this class, in this class, how to pass the value using the constructor from wherever you create the instance of this class, whenever and wherever you create the instance of this class, and passing the value through the constructor in this class, and that is constructor value is passed using the constructor. We can initialize or pass the value to the particular data members, or initialize the data members. Okay, and that data members can be used in particular function of that class, member function of that particular class. Okay, then constructor is used to initialize the data members that are used in that are used in a particular function of that class. Okay, that is parameterized constructor is required to send the value to the particular class variables, and that variables are used in that class in a function. Okay, so we required parameterized constructor in this, and parameterized constructor also required to pass the different values as dynamic values with a separate copy of each instance, separate instance with the separate copies with the separate values. The parameterized constructor is required. This is the example of parameterized constructor. Okay, and again, uh, this is the parameter. And what is the copy constructor? Now we'll see the example of the copy constructor. What is the copy constructor? Okay, suppose we are creating multiple instances. Okay, with the same values. I want to create multiple instances. There is some scenario like that. We are creating this multiple instances with the same value. Then in that case, we require copy constructor. Okay. See, suppose we have a string name int id. Suppose we have two members or variables or fields. Okay, suppose we have two fields and both fields initialize uh, copy constructor, copy on demo, copy on demo. Okay, copy on demo, the copy constructor demo. Okay, we have two fields like name and id, and using, we are just, suppose we have currently a constructor to initialize this data member like string name and int id. Okay, this dot name equal to name and this dot id equal to id. This is the constructor and this is the parameterized constructor. Okay, uh, we are just assigning this value this. Okay, here in the program just we have created the instance of this class. Currently comment out this one. I will tell when they required. Okay, just create the instance of that particular class copycon demo c equal to new copycon demo, and this we required, suppose name is Tata, company name, suppose some company name, c name, here also c name, here also c name, here also C name. Okay, company name is Tata. and after that comma id is 101. Okay, some example like that. The first instance is created. Instance is created like C1, and we just call the constructor and passing the value. In name we have passed data, and id we have passed 101. Explicitly we are calling the parameterized constructor to create the instance. Okay, and this data is passed to class variable c name, and id, this one is passed to this one. Okay, now now the scenario is that I want to create this type of instance, and when I want to see, suppose there is some display function, public void display. There is some display function. Show show dot write line company is company is data, and id is 101. Like that we have print using display method. C1 dot display. Okay, then what will happen, this data is assigned to cname id, like that constructor is called, and the constructor is initialized to the uh, class variables, and after that we have printed this one. Company name is cname and id is 101. Company is data and id is 101. Like that this will print. Company is data and id is 101. Okay, suppose I want to create multiple instance with the same value. There is some requirement. Suppose I want to create multiple instance with the same value. Then what will happen? Just copy and paste like that. Like that we can do C1, C2, and C3, and we just call C3 dot display. Here C1 dot display. Here C2 dot display. C1 dot display. C2 dot display. Each instance have separate copy of all these. Okay, then we are calling this C1 copy display, C2 copy display, C3 copy display. Okay, and we just creating the instance with the same value. then we can do like this. 3 times company name is Tata and ID is 101 printed. But uh, when a copy constructor is required, when this currently we have two arguments. Okay, currently we have two values like Tata and 101 ID. Suppose we have 10, 20 or 30 arguments here in the constructor, then 10 times 30 times we need to again and again write copy paste like that. Okay, so here we required copy constructor. Okay, copy constructor means multiple instances with the same value. Multiple instances with the same value. Multiple instances C1, C2, C3 with the same value Tata 101, 102, 101, Tata 101, Tata 101. This type of requirement can handle by the copy constructor. Means multiple instances with the same value. Then how to achieve using copy constructor? Copy constructor is nothing but just it is the also parameterized constructor, and that constructor takes obj. Just copy constructor takes the arguments with the same type as class. Okay, and class is the user class is used to create user defined data type. This is also a data type. Okay, this can hold the copy con demo type data. Okay, and what we will do here, we will just do this one. This dot cname and this dot id will assign by the obj dot cname and obj dot id. Like that we can say pass. Copy constructor is also a constructor, but it takes the input parameter as copycon demo type. Okay, suppose here we have copycon demo c1 like this. Okay, remove this one. Suppose this is the copy constructor. Okay, and we will pass like that. Suppose copy con demo c2 equal to new copy con demo, and here we pass the instance c1. Okay, currently in c1 instance we have two value Tata and 101. Suppose in instance C1 we have 10 or 20 values, and same value I want to copy in instance C2. Then copy constructor is required. Where copy constructor is means that multiple instances with the same value. Then same value C1 I have passed, and C1 is type of copycon demo. That's why it's take C1, 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 C1 is type of copycon demo. And here C1 means C1 is type of copycon demo, and C1 hold the reference of obj hold the reference of C1. Okay. The obj C name is obj C name means C1 C name. Okay. And obj ID means C1 ID means 101 data 101. Okay. That means we have passed C1 value to obj, and this value is passed to class variable here cname and id. Okay. And c2 dot display and c1 dot display both the print same value. Okay. If again we want to pass, suppose here c3, three instances created, and we are just passing the same value, and just we create c1 dot display, or we can like the c2 dot display, c3 dot display, c2 and c3 dot display. Same thing will be printed this time also. Company is Tata, and ID is 101. This is two value. Then that is required. One value, two value you can directly pass. Okay. When multiple value means 10, 20 values required, then you don't need to pass every time Tata 101 like that. You don't need to pass. Just pass C1, C1, C1 every time. Just pass the instance and copy the instance in second instance. Okay. This is the example of copy constructor. Okay. Now what is remaining? Static constructor. Okay. Now we'll see the static constructor. Okay. Just make another class. Add new item class static constructor demo, static con demo. Okay. Just we have created another constructor, another class static con demo. Okay. When the static constructor is required, when the static constructor is required, why the static constructor required? Case number one. Case number case one. Case one means if you have static data members like static int I like this. If you have static data members, if you have static data members, then to initialize we required static constructor, static constructor, static this demo like this. We required a static constructor. Case number one. Case number one. If you have static data members, static variable, then you required a static constructor to initialize this data member. You require a static constructor to initialize this record. If you don't define explicitly, if you required explicitly the static constructor, then this is the syntax: static, and the class name as the same name is the constructor. This is the constructor. When you use the modifier static, then that is the static constructor. And a static constructor is by default. We don't need any access modifier, any access specifier like public protected internal. There is nothing is required. If you use, then that is error. Okay. Static constructor access modifier are not allowed on static constructor. Okay. Static on demo dot static on demo access modifier are not allowed as a static constructor. Okay, static constructor. And a static constructor is parameter less constructor. That is the reason static constructor cannot be overloaded. Okay, because to overload static constructor is parameter less constructor. Okay, that is the reason we can't overload the static. To overload, we require the parameters. We differentiate the parameter using order, using type. Okay, we can differentiate the method. But static constructor is parameterless. That's why we can't overload static constructor. Okay. If you don't define a explicit static constructor, then by default the compiler will create the static constructor on behalf of the programmer. If programmer doesn't define any static constructor, but class have static data members, then static constructor automatically defined by the compiler on behalf of programmer, like in a non-static constructor. Okay, but in case of a static constructor, also if the static data members is available and a static constructor is not explicitly defined, then automatically the compiler is created static constructor. Okay, why the static constructor is parameter less constructor? Because static constructor is created by the compiler. If it doesn't define any static constructor, then a static constructor is defined by the compiler. And static is by default first call the first block of the method. It is called first. It is the first execution block. Okay. Entry point is main, but first go to the entry point. Pointer go to the entry point, but execute first static block. This static constructor is executed first, and this is called first. So we can't pass the value in it. It is a calling first, then from where we pass the value in it. That is why this is parameter less, because we can't give the value to this constructor. Okay, that is the reason this is parameter less constructor, and that is the reason we can't overload this one. Why the non-static constructor is parameterized and non parameterless also? If we doesn't define any constructor, each and every class have the default constructor. Default constructor. Each and every class create default constructor. If we don't create any constructor in that, that is by default created constructor. And in case of static constructor, if the static member is in the class, and we don't define any static constructor, then implicitly static constructor is defined, and explicitly define the static constructor, then no, a compiler will not define any static constructor implicitly. Okay, static constructor. And what is the static class? If the class is static, then each and everything must be static in that static class. Means data members also static, and constructor also required static constructor. Okay. Each and every class have default constructor except each and every class have non-static default constructor except static class. Static class have only static constructor, no non-static constructor. Okay, and suppose we have this is a class static demo, and this is the static constructor, and suppose static constructor I have print console dot write line static static constructor is called static constructor is called static font demo, static constructor is called. Okay, and now we have class test public static void main, public static void main. This is the entry point. This is the entry point, and suppose first pointer come here, means entry point, and if we have a static constructor in that suppose we create the instance of this class, but currently what we'll do, just main method here, just remove it because I don't want to create the instance. What will happen, entry point come to this point and execute this static constructor. Static constructor is called. After that, this main will call. Suppose in main we have main method is called. We just define some properties, startup object, static con demo, static constructor example, static con demo, static constructor example, static con demo. Then first will pointer come to the main method, And after that main method, if we have a static constructor, then first it will call the static constructor. Static constructor is called, then pointer come to here, and now this will print main method is called. Static block is first called, static constructor is first called, after that main will be called. Main method Main method is called first, but pointer come to here, and the static block is called first. Static constructor is called, then control back to here, and this will execute. The first execution is of static constructor. After that, this line will be printed. Okay, and static constructor is used to initialize the static data members. Okay, we can initialize the static data members, like we can initialize I is equal to, sorry, I equal to 100, and here we can print I. Static constructor is called 100. Static constructor is called 100, and after that main method is called. Static block is called first. Okay, this is a static constructor, and this is called first, and used to initialize the static data members. Okay, and a static constructor have no access modifier and have no parameter, means parameterless constructor. That's why we can't overload the static constructor. This is the example of a static constructor. Okay, and now we will discuss what is the requirement of the constructor, why the constructor is required. Why the constructor is required? Constructor is required. First of all, constructor is required. If you want to create in an instance of a particular class, suppose here in this example, if we want to create an instance of a particular class, any class, if you want to create an instance of a particular class, then constructor is required. Constructor in that class is required. If the constructor is explicitly defined, then no problem. If the constructor is not explicitly defined, then compiler will define the default constructor implicitly. But anyhow, the constructor is required. To create the instance of a particular class, we require constructor. Okay. If you require constructor in a class, and whenever you created the constructor explicitly, then no problem. And you don't define the constructor explicitly, then implicitly compiler will create the constructor. Means either by the programmer or the compiler, constructor is created. Means in every case the constructor is created, I default constructor or implicit constructor or explicit constructor, that is created in every case, either by the compiler or by the programmer. And also, to create the instance, constructor is required. That means constructor is required, and that is created either by the programmer or by the compiler. So our requirement is fulfilled. Then what is the need of explicit constructor? If the constructor is required, and the constructor is created by the compiler if the programmer is not defined, not created. In every cases, to create the instance, constructor is required, and the constructor is created either by the programmer or by the compiler. Then why we need the parameterized constructor? In every time, and every time the constructor is available either by the compiler made constructor or by the programmer made constructor is available, and without and our instance also created with the availability of the constructor, our instance is easily created. Then why we required a parameterized constructor? The parameterized constructor is required because here in some example I have showed, I think before this example I have showed why the parameterized constructor is required. Parameterized constructor is required to give the dynamic, to made the class dynamic. Okay, suppose here currently we have two member variable cname and id. If there is no parameterized constructor here, then we can't pass the cname value dynamically. Means each and every suppose one instance is created for this copycon demo. If one instance is created for copycon demo, then in that one instance cname is available, id is available. Suppose first instance c1 is created, then in c1 we have one copy of cname and id. Okay, and another instance is created of copycon demo class c2. Then in c2 we have cname and id. Another copy is available for cname and id. Okay, one second, I will show in the paint. These are separate copy. Suppose we have created three instance. Suppose we have created the three instance c1, c2, and c3. Then in c1 and c2 and c3 we have one copy, we have second copy, we have third copy of cname, cname and id, and cname and id available also here, also cname and id available. Okay, here cname comma id also available here. Here cname and id, cname and id, cname and id. We have three instances, three copies, c1, c2. Graphically I have not represented very well, so don't worry, just understand the concept. Suppose we have created three instances, c1, c2 and c3. Okay, in each and every instance we have separate copy of cname id, cname id and cname id. Okay, and I want to pass the separate value for separate copy. Means I want to give different CNAME and ID here in C1 instance. In C2 instance, I want to give another CNAME and ID. In C3 instance, I want to give another value of CNAME and ID. Then how to pass in each and every instance how to pass the value to different copy with different values. These are the different copy. Each and every instance created different copies of particular class, variables, functions. Okay. Then we required parameterized constructor. We just create we call the explicit parameterized constructor like this. Like this, we just call the explicit parameterized constructor like this. We just call, and different value from here we can pass. This will pass this will pass cname and id, and this is the instance c1. This is the copy first, and another copy c2. Here also you can pass delete comma 102. Like that you can pass. You can pass different value in different copy of different instance using the parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor is give the flexibility to make the class dynamic. Okay, this is the powerful concept of the constructor. Parameterized constructor is very useful to make the class dynamic. To make the class dynamic. Okay, this is the difference between parameterless constructor and parameterized constructor, and the constructor is needed. Without parameterized constructor, our complete need is not fulfilled. Okay, the constructor is needed. Okay, only constructor, default constructor, our need is not fulfilled. Okay, then default constructor is another use, and parameterized constructor is another use. Okay, both have different uses in different cases. Constructor is needed. Default constructor is everywhere present for each and every class. Default constructor is available. Okay, but default constructor, we can't pass the dynamic value using the default constructor. Okay, that is the why parameterized constructor is required. The constructor is required. Constructor is required. Okay. Someone ask the question like that, if each and every class have the default constructor, if you don't create any constructor in a particular class, then default constructor is available, and we can create the instance of the particular class. Uh, then what is the need of constructor? What is the need of constructor? If every class have implicit constructor, and using the implicit constructor we can create the instance of a class, then why the constructor explicit constructor is required? This is the case where explicit constructor is required, like copy constructor, like parameterized constructor, to make the class dynamic, to make the value or to pass the value to different instances, to different value with different instance with different copy, like that we have seen in this example. So currently the constructor type, example, and why the constructor is needed is completed. I think one more video is required to complete the constructor features and constructor things. After that we will make another after this I will make one another video to complete the constructor feature and constructor theoretical and examples part. After that we will make the video. I will make the video on another topic. Okay, maybe tomorrow I will complete the constructor concept, and after that I will make the video on different topic. Okay, that's all. Thank you.